Hello YouTubers. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do videos. I'm also at a different location than what I'm normally at. I'm not at home because just in the garden house here because it's just so hot today and it's too much to stay at home, and just decided to go out in the sun, and it's a Sunday afternoon and we're just going to try to relax. And so, but also today's video I'm not going to be playing anything, but today is going to be more or less of a career video, and what I like to talk about is doubling. Now, I started out my career basically, even before my career while I was in college, I started out basically as a pit musician, which means, I was playing as a musician for musicals or any type of theater productions, playing in the pit, and that involved of course, as a saxophonist, not only playing saxophone, you're usually playing flute, at least flute and clarinet. In today's video, we'll be dealing about that subject. If you are thinking about a career as a pit musician or as a doubler, or thinking just as a career as a saxophonist, period, playing saxophone alone is really a rare thing. And at some point you're going to have to play other woodwinds, and I say not only that, but at least probably have some keyboard skills. Other people, maybe you played guitar. Guitar was my first instrument, but I basically left that alone. But if you play guitar, it may be something that you're not called for in connection with your saxophone playing, but who knows, if you played with a pop band and if you play saxophone and happen to play guitar, or if you play guitar and happen to play saxophone, it could very well be that you'll wind up in that type of situation. But anyway, let's get down to the woodwinds. So for me, I started playing flute just a couple of years after I started playing saxophone, and I did that while I was in high school, and then later continued on. I didn't get around to playing clarinet until college, because basically I kind of like avoided it, And what's also is optional, which would be not a bad idea if you're thinking about playing double reeds like oboe or oboe, English horn, bassoon, depending on what instruments you're playing. I've met musicians in my career, woodwind players, who played bassoon, but they were actually mainly a bassoonist who happened to play saxophone as well, who happened to play baritone saxophone, or there's that constellation as well. But if you're a saxophonist wanting to turn toward a double reed or any other instrument, there's a good deal of considerations to take care of. But first, let's get on the technical side. Well, first of all, if you're going to start out playing clarinet, one of the things you have to watch out for is embouchure. Saxophone and clarinet embouchure have nothing to do with each other. And this basically, actually a caveat I want to talk about before, even if you play other saxophones, just because you know how to play saxophone and you're just adding another saxophone, please don't think that it'll be easy, because every single instrument has their own history, their own difficulties, their own advantages, and actually I look at it, you have to treat each and every instrument as their own animal, as their own thing, and that's the only real way to actually learn them. You have to treat them with respect as being an individual, if I have to say. Very often for like music teachers, they'll give advice about playing clarinet and saxophone, because the mouthpiece is similar, so they should be okay, you should go together. No, the mouthpieces are actually not similar, and the embouchures actually have nothing to do with each other. So you really have to make a difference there. Clarinet embouchure is in general a lot tighter than saxophone embouchure. The beak of the mouthpiece on a clarinet will be a lot shorter than it is on saxophone, and of course the angle of the beak will also be a little bit more extreme than on saxophone. So there are differences there, and when it comes down to the fingering, Basically, as a saxophonist learning clarinet, you will have to learn a new fingering for every single note, because what you see as an octave key is not an octave key on the clarinet, is a register key, which, yeah, you get into a next register, but like one fingering, like say the low G on clarinet with the register key becomes a D, an octave and a fifth higher than that, and that's the way it's built on, And then, of course, you have a bunch of other keys on the instrument that just don't exist on saxophone, and not the easiest to play in the beginning if you don't know them. So that's one thing to look out for. If you're used to playing vibrato on your saxophone, at first for clarinet you're going to have to kill it. Basic clarinet playing does not use vibrato. In fact, you'll have to spend some time, a lot of time, just learning how to play a straight, clear tone without any vibrato whatsoever. In order to get that, you'll have to save the vibrato later when it comes down to playing music like in a big band where you're doubling clarinet and you're playing music from swing era. Swing era, then there'll be vibrato used then, or music before then, And if you're playing another type of group where you might have to play a klezmer clarinet, then you'll have to reintroduce the vibrato into your clarinet playing. So, like I said, at first you have to learn to kill it, the vibrato, but then you'll learn to re-add it later. Another consideration when it comes down to clarinet, as a double, you may want to consider playing E-flat clarinet, so E-flat, so soprano clarinet. It's maybe rare, but it may be something, who knows, you get hired to play a circus gig and maybe you might need it, Another consideration would be bass clarinet. Now, bass clarinet for a saxophonist may be a little bit easier to play than the regular soprano clarinet, just because of, the way you position, where you hold the instrument. The positioning is similar to saxophone. Most of the keys are closed already, as in saxophone, but still, don't let that fool you. The embouchure is different. You'll still have to get used to playing it differently, and just because if you're pretty well versed in clarinet does not mean automatically you'll be able to play bass clarinet, because even among clarinetists, bass clarinet is different, So, moving on, flute. Flute, you'll have to do a great deal with playing overtones, dealing with your embouchure. There are different ways to do the embouchure. I won't get into this video, but you'll have to experiment what suits best for you. And just because saxophone uses a BOEHM fingering system, and the flute too, yeah, there'll be plenty of fingerings that you recognize, but don't think that just because of that it'll be easy. It won't be. It won't be automatic. Maybe you'll have more of affinity to flute than clarinet or something like that, but what? I mean, like as I mentioned before, I've been playing the flute since I was about 16, and sometimes I still have issues with it, but that's just the way playing any instrument is. So, and on top of it, if you're going to be seriously doubling with flute, you would need to consider playing piccolo as well on top of that. And to a little lesser extent, but possible, is alto flute. I mean, I played once on a tour playing the musical chorus line, in which I was playing the principal woodwind book, which is about 80% flute, a little bit of piccolo, 8 bars of alto flute. Really, 8 bars of alto flute. But still, saxophone was like the least important instrument. And this is what I have to say too about playing a lot of theater music, things like that. If you wind up getting into pit musician, really, even though if you're a saxophonist and you think like, wait, great, get all these doubles, but really you're gonna have to spend a lot of time on your doubles, because really the most of the time in those genres, your saxophone will be like the least important instrument to know how to play. You really have to be a better clarinetist, like say if you have the chance to play the musical West Side Story like I have, and that is really mostly a clarinet book, and as I mentioned, a chorus line was more or less of a flute book. Other musicals, like I've done like Annie, which would be for the most part saxophone and some clarinet. I've done some jazz musicals like Bubbling Brown Sugar, which was mostly tenor saxophone and clarinet, but it was mostly saxophone. But as I said, that's a rarity, that you'll have really a lot of saxophone. It's actually, you have to concentrate on your other doubles. Now, the other options I talk about that are viable that you want to think about is double reeds is oboe. Oboe is a good accompaniment. I mean, I don't play oboe myself. I've never needed to even move in that direction, and I personally didn't want to, but I know of colleagues who have done that while they were doing their bachelor's degree in saxophone. They took private lessons on oboe during that time, and one colleague, he wound up doing his master's degree on oboe, did his bachelor's on saxophone, did his master's degree on oboe, and that afforded him the chance to not only play musicals, where he also played some clarinet, he also played flute on the side, but he concentrated on playing his oboe, and he became a sought-after sideman for oboe, for musicals, and also for orchestral work. He's gotten a position playing oboe in an orchestra. So that's another way of keeping yourself in the work. Now, if you're going the route of playing oboe, what you need to strongly consider on top of that is to play the English horn. Basically, I don't think there's a single oboist out there, whose main instrument is oboe, who does not play English horn as well. One colleague I've known through many years, he's really an expert woodwind player. He grew up with all the instruments, so he played all saxophones excellently, flutes excellently, clarinet, Vicky, oboe, English horn. He did all that. He played them all well, and that was his main thing. He was an excellent jazz player too, but that's just not what he was looking for. He was just looking for having some steady work, doing these things so that he could just continue playing all his doubles and just be up on them, and that's where he spent his career. And so, as I mentioned, for oboe, you have to strongly consider English horn, on playing on top of that. And as an option, if like your main saxophone is like baritone saxophone, for instance, you may want to consider, and if you're thinking about a double reed instrument, you may want to consider playing bassoon, which would be a whole nother kettle of fish, because in the fingering system there's a lot to do with your thumbs to play that instrument as well. I don't play bassoon, but I've had a colleague whose first instrument was bassoon until he changed over to saxophone just because he did bassoon quite well, but it's just like he had no interest in playing in an orchestra. I was like, well, why did you even start playing bassoon? He said it was just a bad idea. But anyway, so I'm just getting into that. Also, these days, which is also a viable option for another doubling instrument, and I still have some colleagues that really don't take it seriously, but I think it's something that one should look into, is into playing some type of a electronic wind instrument, like the EWI, like the Yamaha digital saxophone, or whatever your favorite is. Now, and some saxophonists start playing these instruments in order to try to replace instruments that they don't have. For instance, of the natural instruments, if they're hired to play in a small pit with them playing the theater, and they have to they're playing saxophone, playing flute, but maybe they just don't play oboe or bassoon. And if the musical director has no problems with that, why not? That if you play those sounds on your electronic wind instrument, if it's not in the budget to have these instruments and things like that, and if you could do it all with electronic wind instrument, fine and good. I personally am not really a fan for using electronic wind instruments in order to replace natural instruments, because I just don't think they sound good. But it's still a viable option as far as learning to play synthetic sounds, synthesis, and that's something on top of playing electronic instrument, I'd say you should consider learning something about synthesis and learning something about how to manipulate and create your own sounds on that instrument of choice. So basically, I'd say that's something. I mean, if you subscribe to my channel, you know that I have a couple of videos where I'm playing EWI and talk about some things there. I still plan to do some more. I haven't done so in quite some time, but I will get back to that in any case. And just because I'm dealing with learning a little bit more about synthesis and also about some equipment as far as wanting to use the EWI in a live performance, so I'm looking into what keyboard amps, what pedals, and stuff like that, because the instrument alone is fine, but I think you could do a lot much more if you get into using some stomp boxes and stuff like that, things you see guitarists use and things like that. So some saxophonists use them on their sax, playing electronically manipulated saxophone, but this is also an option to do with your EWI as well. And so this is one thing, electronic wind instrument. One thing I'd like to touch on too is maybe it would be a good idea to get up on your keyboard skills, because I know this lies outside the realm of woodwind instruments, but who knows? You get hired to play in a band, and you're playing pop band, and maybe you should learn a little bit of keyboard. Now, if you did your studies in music, I know that you've already probably had 4 semesters of piano behind you, like either in a class situation or maybe private lessons. That's a skill that belongs to studying music, is that you'll probably have 4 semesters of that. But after you've graduated, you should not stop playing piano. In fact, because there's always situations where it comes in hand, and this is also maybe you want to consider learning to play at least some basic keyboard in order to supplement your position in a band. And so, like, now getting just a little bit to business side of all this. I mean, this all has to do with business. But now, one of the things, I mentioned all these doublings. It's one thing you've financed buying saxophones, and you're getting flute and clarinet. I'm making suggestions for other instruments like piccolo, alto flute, bass clarinet, oboe, bassoon, English horn, and especially when it comes to playing, oboe and English horn, it gets really expensive. I'd say, first of all, after bed, try to get the best instrument that you can afford to get. Whether you buy it outright or whether you have the chance to rent an instrument in order to try it out for a while, get a feel for it, learn what equipment that you need, like what mouthpiece and reeds should be used that you want to use, and things to look out for in the instrument that you want to eventually purchase. Maybe renting an instrument, if possible, is a very good option for you to take care of. Very good option to look into. And again, I say about the financing. First disclaimer: this is not financial advice I'm giving. This is not tax advice. What I'm giving here. I'm not a business professional. I'm not a tax professional. I am not a financial professional at all. So I want to say that first. But I would like to say is that if you're one who's teaching a lot, you're teaching lessons, instead of just being some guy or gal teaching private lessons, maybe you should set up your lessons up as a business, that you set yourself up as a music school. Doesn't matter if you're the only one teaching, doesn't matter. And you rent or buy or take out loans for whatever instruments you want to buy only through your business and not through your personal name. And what this will do any expenses, any interest charges that you'll have, you should be able to write them off your taxes. Now, like I said, again, I'm not a tax professional. I am not a financial professional. I am not a business professional in this sense. This is something that you will definitely have to talk to your tax preparer, talk to your accountant, talk to an accountant. If you don't have an accountant, talk to somebody in your family who knows somebody who you could ask, or maybe some colleague you know from school who is a tax professional. Get information before you do anything, and get advice about how you could best optimize your money. Because I remember my father telling me, he was also a professional musician. He was a composer, arranger, musical director, and he told me as a woodwind player, I was going to spend the first 10 years of my career gathering my instruments. And even though I chose eventually a different path, but I also see that what he said was, of course, absolutely true. And it's a considerable amount of time. It's also a considerable amount of money that's invested in all these instruments. And of course, that will also depend on where you practice your career. How does everything look like? What does this local scene look like? Is there a possibility for this type of work? These are all things you will have to really take a hard look at your music scene about where you are. So again, so that's about, let's say I'm just looking at my notes here. That's about the last advice I have to give on doubling and the world of doubling. So really, try to get the best quality instrument that you can afford. You don't have to go all out. I mean, for instance, for bass clarinets, for instance, you don't have to go for wood immediately. There's a lot of bass clarinets, very good quality bass clarinets, who are made from resonite, that sound very, very good, sound just like wood, and cost only a fraction of the price. Because a bass clarinet also can be very expensive. You can get very good student models for around $2,500 if you want to get into, and that's with resonite. They sound good, But if you really want to get wood, get authentic, and especially getting a low C bass clarinet. Once you check it out, you know what I'm talking about. Then you could be talking somewhere up to like $18,000. So it doesn't cost. Saxophones don't cost nearly as much. About the most you would probably spend on a baritone saxophone will be, if you want to get a professional model, you'd be spending somewhere between $6,000 to $10,000, for a baritone saxophone, and still around $2,000 to $3,000 for a student model, which depending on what you need for your scene or how often you intend to play it, how often you tend to use it. A student model Yamaha, for instance, may be totally enough, which you'll spend somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 for. And so anyway, just some ideas on that. So again, basic flute, clarinet. Should get some keyboard skills. Think about playing electronic wind instruments. And what I also forgot to mention with all this, was about how do you get time to do it? How you learn all these things? Well, you're intelligent enough. You've learned to play one instrument. You approach it the same way you did with your first instrument. You have to allot just a regular time to do it. The thing is, you don't need to be totally virtuous on every other double. You don't have to be, to do it for most gigs. But you should allot at least half an hour to an hour a day playing that doubling instrument. And just do basic stuff. Just learn to get a good tone. Learn to get decent proficiency, just playing your scales and arpeggios. And play music, Get together with another colleague and play duets with them. play duets together. If you don't have anyone that maybe you could play together with, hey, get a good mic, get a good audio interface, fire up your computer with a free DAW, or cheap or free DAW. If you're playing, if your computer is a Mac, hey, use GarageBand. Really, it's enough. GarageBand's in, it costs you nothing. If you're using Windows, maybe you want to use Cakewalk or something, whatever's out there, and just record yourself playing. Record the duets and trios and quartets yourself, and just check out your reading skills, how you're breathing, your intonation, your tone, everything. Record yourself and do it often, on every instrument, And if you have a talent for writing, arrange a few things that you're going to use all your doubles, and record them all. So in any case, this whole thing about doubles, this is not going to be just something that's going to be done quickly. This is for the long haul. This is a skill that in any case, some might be thinking, yeah, but if I spend all this time, when am I going to get back to playing saxophone, playing jazz? Look, man, there's absolutely no lost time playing doubles, because there's always skills to learn from those doubles that you can bring back into your saxophone playing. Guaranteed, always. So you cannot lose. Even playing other saxophones. During college I spent an entire year playing only soprano saxophone, and there were so many things I learned from doing that I was able to transfer into my alto playing. Maybe in another video I'll get into that. But anyway, that's enough for the video today. It's been long enough. And I say, if you find this useful, please like, comment, share with your friends, and subscribe. And we'll see each other soon. Take care.